The
What
phone
happened?
lay
Where are
3
you?
feet
I'm
away.
hurt. They're
It might
coming
as well have
back.
been 3
I'm on
miles.
my way.
Meredith Holloway pressed her cheek against the cold hardwood floor of her apartment and stared at the device glowing in the darkness. The screen showed 2:14 in the morning. Outside, Phoenix slept beneath a canopy of desert stars, oblivious to the woman lying broken in a second-floor apartment on the east side of town. Her left arm was wrong. She knew it without looking. The angle was unnatural, the pain so intense it had circled past agony into something almost peaceful. Shock, probably, her body protecting her from a truth too terrible to process. 3 feet to the phone, she tried to move, and the world exploded into white-hot fire. A scream tore from her throat, raw and primal, before she clamped her teeth down on her lower lip hard enough to taste blood. The neighbors couldn't hear. If they heard, they might call the police. If the police came, Dalton would know. And if Dalton knew she had told anyone, the thought trailed off into the familiar territory of fear. 2 years of fear, 730 days of walking on eggshells, of measuring her words, of learning to read the weather in his eyes before the storm arrived. Tonight, the storm had been a hurricane. Meredith inched forward on her belly, using her right elbow to drag herself across the floor. Every movement sent lightning bolts of pain shooting up her left side. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the air conditioning. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps. 2 feet to the phone, she thought about Dalton's face in those final moments. The way his features had twisted into something she didn't recognize. The way his hands had closed around her wrist with a grip like iron. The way he had twisted, twisted until she heard a sound that would haunt her nightmares for years to come. The wet snap of bone breaking. Her own bone, her own arm, broken by the man who had promised to love her. 1 foot to the phone. She reached out with her good hand, fingers trembling, and closed them around the device. The screen lit up at her touch. For a long moment, she simply stared at it, her mind cycling through the contacts stored in its memory. Not her mother. Mom lived in Seattle now, remarried to a man who didn't understand why Meredith had ever moved to Arizona in the first place. Calling her would mean explanations, questions, the inevitable "I told you so," delivered in that disappointed tone Meredith had grown up dreading. Not her friends. What friends? Dalton had systematically cut her off from everyone who mattered. The college roommate who used to call every week. The co-workers who had invited her to happy hours. The neighbors who had once waved hello in the hallway. All of them had faded away one by one until Meredith existed in a world populated only by Dalton and the ghosts of connections she had let him sever. Not the police. God, especially not the police. Dalton's father was Councilman Ashford, a man whose face smiled down from billboards all over the city. His uncle was Judge Ashford, who had presided over the courthouse for 15 years. The Ashfords owned this town in ways that Meredith was only beginning to understand. They would bury her complaint before the ink dried on the report. There was only one person left. One person who had never liked Dalton, who had warned her from the beginning, who had seen through the charm to the darkness underneath. Her brother. Meredith's thumb hovered over Garrett's name in her contacts. She hadn't called him in months. Their last conversation had ended in a fight with Garrett, telling her that Dalton was bad news, and Meredith defending her boyfriend with the desperate loyalty of the truly blind. She had hung up on her own brother and hadn't spoken to him since. But Garrett would answer. No matter what time it was, no matter how their last conversation had ended, Garrett would always answer when she called. She pressed the button and lifted the phone to her ear. It rang twice. "Mary." His voice was alert, not groggy. Garrett never slept well these days. He had told her once that the ghost kept him company at night, and she had never asked which ghost he meant. "It's 2 in the morning. What's wrong?" The sound of his voice broke something inside her. All the walls she had built, all the masks she had worn, all the lies she had told herself about her perfect relationship with her perfect boyfriend crumbled into dust. She opened her mouth to explain, to provide context, to somehow make him understand. What came out was a sob. "Garrett," her voice cracked on his name. "Garrett, I need help." "Where are you?" The alert tone sharpened into something harder, dangerous. "Mary, tell me where you are." "My apartment. I'm at my apartment. I can't get up. Garrett, he broke my arm. Dalton broke my arm." Silence on the other end of the line. A silence so complete that for a moment she thought the call had dropped. Then she heard a sound she had never heard before in her life. A low growl, almost inhuman, rising from her brother's chest like the warning of a predator about to strike. "Don't move." His voice had changed. This wasn't Garrett, her annoying older brother, who had taught her to ride a bike and scared off playground bullies. This was someone else entirely. someone she had only heard rumors about. "I'm coming." The line went dead. Meredith let the phone slip from her fingers and closed her eyes. Help was coming. For the first time in 2 years, she had reached out beyond the walls of her prison, and help was coming. She just hoped Garrett didn't kill anyone on the way. The apartment door exploded inwards 17 minutes later. Meredith flinched at the sound, her heart slamming against her ribs as the doorframe splintered and the deadbolt tore free from the wood. For one terrible instant, she thought Dalton had come back, that he had somehow heard about the phone call, that he was here to finish what he had started. But the figure that stepped through the ruined doorway wasn't Dalton. Garrett Holloway stood 6 feet 2 inches tall and weighed 230 pounds, most of it muscle earned through decades of hard living. His arms were sleeved in tattoos that told stories Meredith had never fully understood. His hair was cropped short, his beard trimmed close, and his eyes held the cold emptiness of a man who had seen too much of the world's darkness. He was 42 years old, and he had been a Hell's Angel for 15 of those years. They called him the Beast, and looking at him now, Meredith understood why. "Mary." He crossed the room in 3 strides and dropped to his knees beside her. His hands, scarred and calloused from years of violence, touched her face with a gentleness that made her start crying all over again. "I'm here. I've got you." "My arm." She gestured weakly with her chin. "It's bad, Garrett. I heard it break." He looked at her left arm and his expression went utterly blank. The kind of blank that preceded storms. The kind of blank that meant someone was about to get hurt. "Where is he?" "Gone. He left after he did it. I don't know where he went." Garrett's jaw worked. She could see the muscles jumping beneath his skin, the battle being fought behind his eyes. Every instinct in his body was screaming at him to hunt to find Dalton Ashford and make him pay in blood and broken bones. "I'm taking you to the hospital." He slid his arms beneath her, lifting her with impossible care. "St. Mary's is 10 minutes away." "Garrett," she grabbed the front of his leather vest with her good hand. Please don't go after him." "Not tonight. I need you with me." He looked down at her, and for a moment she saw the brother she remembered from childhood. The boy who had walked her to school every day because he didn't trust the world to keep her safe. The teenager who had worked 2 jobs so she could have new clothes when their mother couldn't afford them. The young man who had promised on the day their father left that he would never abandon her. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. "Let's get you fixed." He carried her to his motorcycle, and Meredith pressed her face against his shoulder as the engine roared to life beneath them. The wind whipped past as they tore through the empty streets of Phoenix, and she closed her eyes against the pain, against the memories, against everything that had led her to this moment. She was 29 years old, and she had never felt so broken. St. Mary's emergency room was quiet at this hour. A handful of patients sat in the waiting area nursing various ailments under the harsh fluorescent lights. Garrett carried Meredith through the automatic doors and immediately commanded the attention of every medical professional in sight. It wasn't just his size or the leather vest with its Hell's Angels patches. It was the way he moved, the way he held himself, the way the air seemed to crackle with barely contained violence wherever he went. Nurses and doctors who had seen everything in their careers still stepped back when Garrett Holloway walked past. "She needs help," his voice carried across the room. "Now." They were in an examination room within minutes. A young doctor with tired eyes took one look at Meredith's arm and immediately ordered x-rays. The bone had broken cleanly, he explained, which was actually good news. It would heal well if properly set. The bruises on her face and neck were another matter. "Ma'am," the doctor's voice was gentle but direct. "I need to ask you some questions. Would you like your friend to wait outside?" "Brother," Garrett corrected, "and I'm not going anywhere." Meredith reached out and took Garrett's hand. "He stays." The doctor nodded slowly. He had seen this before, the unspoken dynamics of domestic violence cases. The family members who were either part of the problem or fiercely protective. This one clearly was the latter. "Can you tell me what happened?" Meredith looked at Garrett, then back at the doctor. The words caught in her throat, but she forced them out anyway. "My boyfriend. We were arguing. He grabbed my arm and he twisted it until it broke." "Has this happened before the violence, I mean?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Meredith felt Garrett's hand tighten around hers, felt the tremor that ran through his body as he fought to control himself. "Yes," she whispered, "but never this bad. He's pushed me before, grabbed me too hard. But he always apologized. He always promised it would never happen again." Garrett made a sound low in his throat, something between a growl and a groan. "We can contact the police," the doctor said. "File a report. There are resources available, shelters, counseling, legal aid." No. The word came out sharper than Meredith intended. No police, not yet. I need to think. I need time to think. The doctor's expression softened with understanding. He had seen this too many times, the fear, the confusion, the desperate hope that somehow the situation could be managed without involving authorities. He handed Meredith a card with the number of a domestic violence hotline and left to arrange for her arm to be set. The moment the door closed, Garrett exploded. Tell me everything. He was pacing the small room like a caged animal. Every time he touched you, every time he hurt you, I need to know all of it. All? Garrett, 2 years, Mary. You've been with him for 2 years and I knew something was wrong. I knew it from the first time I met him. But you wouldn't listen. You kept defending him, kept telling me I didn't understand. I know. And now he's broken your arm. Your arm, Mary. What's next? Your ribs. Your skull. His voice cracked. I can't lose you. You're the only family I have left. Meredith watched her brother fall apart and felt something shift inside her. For 2 years, she had been protecting Dalton, making excuses for him, hiding the truth from everyone who loved her. She had told herself it wasn't that bad, that he didn't mean it, that things would get better if she just tried harder to be what he wanted. But things hadn't gotten better. They had gotten worse. And tonight, lying on the floor of her apartment with her arm bent at an impossible angle, she had finally seen the truth she had been avoiding all along. Dalton Ashford was going to kill her. Maybe not tonight, maybe not tomorrow. But eventually, if she stayed with him, he would take her life. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I'm so sorry I didn't listen. Garrett stopped pacing and looked at her. The rage in his eyes dimmed slightly, replaced by something older and deeper. The love of an older brother who had spent his whole life trying to protect his little sister from a world that never stopped hurting her. We're past sorry, he said. We're in the part where we fix this. How? The question was genuine. Meredith had no idea how to fix any of this. Dalton's family owned half the city. His father sat on the city council, his uncle presided over the courthouse, and his mother chaired the board of 3 different charities. They were untouchable, connected, and ruthless in protecting their own. I'll handle it. Garrett's voice dropped to a register she had never heard before. Cold. Final. He'll never hurt you again. I promise you that. No. Meredith struggled to sit up straighter, ignoring the pain in her arm. Garrett, no. I know what you're thinking. I can see it on your face, but you can't. Give me one good reason. Because I need you here. She met his eyes and willed him to understand. Not in prison, not on the run, here with me. If you go after Dalton, you'll kill him. And if you kill him, I lose my brother. I can't survive that, Garrett. I can't survive losing you too. The words hit him like physical blows. She watched his face cycle through a dozen emotions, rage, grief, frustration, love, before finally settling into something that looked almost like defeat. He broke your arm. I know. He's been hurting you for 2 years. I know. And you want me to just let it go? No. She shook her head. I want you to help me fight him the right way, the legal way. I want you to be my brother, not my avenger. I want you to stand beside me while I figure out how to take my life back. Garrett stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly he reached out and took her good hand in both of his. 24 hours, he said. I'll give you 24 hours to figure out a plan. But after that, if he comes near you again, if he even looks at you wrong, I'm going to do what I should have done the first time I met him. 24 hours. Meredith squeezed his hand. Thank you. The doctor returned with a nurse to set her arm. Garrett stayed through the whole procedure, holding her good hand while she bit down on a towel to keep from screaming. When it was over, when her arm was properly casted and the painkillers had started to dull the worst of the agony, a second figure appeared in the doorway. Sullivan Barrett was 40 years old with a lean build and watchful eyes that missed nothing. Like Garrett, he wore the leather vest of the Hellsangels adorned with patches that marked him as a full member in good standing. Unlike Garrett, there was a softness to him, a gentleness that seemed at odds with the world he inhabited. I heard the bike, he said quietly. Figured something was wrong. Mary's boyfriend. Garrett's voice was flat. Broke her arm. Sully's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. A hardening like steel being tempered in flame. Where is he? Gone for now, but Mary wants us to handle this the right way. Sully looked at Meredith, really looked at her, and she saw something in his gaze that she hadn't expected. Not pity, not judgment, understanding. The right way's harder, he said, but it usually works out better in the end. I know, she said. You need a place to stay. Somewhere he can't find you. She's staying with me. Garrett's tone brooked no argument. My place has good security and the brothers will keep watch. Sully nodded. What about the legal side? We got lawyers who handle things like this. I don't know yet. Meredith looked down at her casted arm. I don't know anything yet. I just know I can't go back. I can't ever go back to him. Then you won't. Sully's voice was simple, direct, certain. Whatever you need, we're here. They left the hospital as the sky was beginning to lighten in the east. Meredith sat in Sully's truck while Garrett rode his motorcycle beside them, a silent escort through the waking streets of Phoenix. She watched the city blur past through the window and tried to make sense of everything that had happened in the past few hours. 24 hours ago, she had been living a lie, pretending that everything was fine, telling herself that Dalton's temper was just stress, that his controlling behavior was just love, that the bruises she hid beneath long sleeves were accidents that wouldn't happen again. Now the lie had shattered along with the bone in her left arm. Garrett's house was a modest ranch-style home on the outskirts of the city, set back from the road and surrounded by desert scrub. It wasn't much, but it was fortified with security cameras, motion sensors, and the unspoken protection of the Hells Angels Brotherhood. No one came here without being seen, and no one threatened the Beast family without paying the price. Sully helped Meredith inside while Garrett secured the perimeter. The guest bedroom was small but clean, with a comfortable bed and a window that looked out over the empty desert. She sat on the edge of the mattress and stared at nothing while the two men moved quietly through the house, setting up for a siege that might never come. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and looked at the screen. A text message from an unknown number, but she recognized the words instantly. The cadence, the barely veiled threat. You made a mistake tonight, Meredith. My father is Councilman Ashford. My uncle is Judge Ashford. No one in this city will believe a word you say against me. Come home now and I'll forget this ever happened. Stay away and I'll make sure you regret it for the rest of your life. She read the message 3 times, feeling the familiar tendrils of fear wrapping around her heart. He was right. Of course he was right. The Ashfords controlled everything. They had money-power connections that stretched into every corner of the justice system. What chance did she have against them? None. She had no chance at all. The thought paralyzed her. For a long moment, she simply sat there, phone clutched in her trembling hand, ready to give up before she had even started fighting. Then she remembered the sound her arm had made when it broke. That wet snap, that sickening crunch of bone giving way under pressure. The sound that would echo in her nightmares for years to come. Dalton had done that to her, deliberately, cruelly, while she begged him to stop. And if she went back, he would do worse. Something shifted inside Meredith Holloway. A small flame, barely more than an ember, but real, alive, angry. She wasn't going back. She wasn't ever going back. And if the Ashfords wanted a fight, she would give them one. But first, she needed to understand exactly what she was dealing with. She opened her laptop with her one good hand and began to search. The deeper Meredith dug, the worse it got. Dalton Ashford had been accused of assault 3 times before meeting her. Each case had been quietly settled out of court, the accusers disappearing from public record as if they had never existed. His father's political connections had ensured that the media never caught wind of the allegations, and his uncle's position on the bench had guaranteed that any legal proceedings were handled with extreme discretion. She found fragments of the stories in old social media posts archived, forum discussions, whispered accusations that never quite became official complaints. 2 other women at least who had experienced what Meredith was experiencing now. 2 other women who had been silenced one way or another. Lauren Whitmore, 26 years old when she dated Dalton for 8 months in 2019. Her Facebook profile had gone dark shortly after their breakup, and her last public post was a cryptic message about learning to recognize the signs of abuse. She had moved to Seattle not long after, according to a LinkedIn update that was quickly deleted. Nina Calloway, 31 years old, a paralegal who had worked at a firm that handled some of the Ashford family's legal matters. Her relationship with Dalton and Wuhan had been brief but intense, ending abruptly when she quit her job and relocated to Denver. The only trace of her existence was a comment on a domestic violence support forum posted anonymously, but containing details that could only have come from someone who knew Dalton intimately. He made me feel like I was going crazy, the comment read. Like everything was my fault. Like I deserved what happened to me. It took years of therapy to understand that I was being manipulated. If you're reading this and you're in a similar situation, please get out before it's too late. Meredith stared at those words until they blurred before her eyes. She wasn't alone. She had never been alone. Dalton had done this before to other women, and he would do it again to women after her. Unless someone stopped him. Unless she stopped him. The flame inside her flickered brighter. She thought about Lauren Whitmore silenced and running. About Nina Calloway hiding on the other side of the country. About all the other women who might come after them walking into Dalton's arms without knowing the danger they faced. If Meredith stayed silent, she would be complicit in whatever he did next. The realization hit her like a physical blow. For 2 years, she had been focused on her own survival, her own fear, her own desperate attempts to keep the peace. But this was bigger than her. This was about a pattern of abuse that stretched back years and would stretch forward indefinitely unless someone had the courage to break it. She closed the laptop and sat in the darkness of the guest bedroom, thinking. The police were not an option, not with Judge Ashford presiding over half the cases in the county. But there were other paths to justice: civil lawsuits, media exposure, advocacy groups that specialized in taking down powerful abusers. She needed help, professional help, someone who knew how to navigate this world of legal strategies and public relations campaigns, someone who had done this before and won. Meredith picked up her phone and searched for domestic violence lawyers in Phoenix. Most of the results were generic firms that handled a variety of cases. But one name kept appearing in articles about high-profile abuse cases, a woman who had made a career out of taking down wealthy and connected abusers. Vivian Caldwell, Harvard Law, 15 years of experience, a 90% conviction rate in domestic violence cases, and most importantly, a reputation for taking on cases that other lawyers considered too dangerous or too politically sensitive. Meredith saved the number to her phone but didn't call. Not yet. It was still early morning and she needed to think through her options before making any moves. One wrong step could alert the Ashfords to her plans and give them time to prepare their defense. She lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. Her arm throbbed beneath the cast, a constant reminder of what Dalton had done to her. But the pain was becoming something else now, not just suffering, motivation. Every twinge, every ache, every moment of discomfort was a reminder of why she needed to fight. Garrett knocked on the door a few hours later. "How are you holding up?" "I've been better." She sat up slowly, wincing at the movement. "But I've been thinking." He sat down in the chair beside the bed, his massive frame somehow looking small in this domestic setting. "About what?" "About not being a victim anymore." Garrett studied her face. "What does that mean?" "It means I found something." She opened her laptop and showed him the research she had done. The other women, the pattern of abuse, the way the Ashford family had systematically silenced every accusation against their son. "This isn't just about me," she said. "It's about all of them. Lauren and Nina and whoever came before them. And whoever will come after me if I don't do something." Garrett was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "You know what you're talking about, right? Taking on the Ashfords isn't like filing a regular complaint. They'll come at you with everything they've got. Lawyers, private investigators may be worse. They'll try to destroy your reputation, your career, your life." "I know. And you want to do it anyway?" Meredith met her brother's eyes. "I don't think I have a choice. Not anymore. If I walk away, if I stay silent, like Lauren and Nina did, Dalton wins. He gets to keep hurting people, and I have to live with knowing I could have stopped him." Garrett's expression shifted. Something that looked almost like pride flickered across his features. "Okay," he said. "Then we do this together, but we do it smart. No rushing in, no half measures. We build a case so strong that even the Ashfords can't bury it." "I found a lawyer." Meredith showed him Vivian Caldwell's information. "She specializes in cases like this. High-profile abusers with political connections." "I've heard of her." Garrett nodded slowly. "She's good. Expensive but good. I have savings. And I'll get a second job if I need to. Whatever it takes." Garrett shook his head. "You're not paying for this alone. The club will help. And I've got money set aside too. We're family Mary. Your fight is my fight." The words broke something inside her. For 2 years, she had been isolated alone, convinced that she had no one to turn to. But here was her brother offering everything he had to help her fight. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me yet." His voice hardened. "Thank me when Dalton Ashford is behind bars." That afternoon, Meredith made the call. Vivian Caldwell answered on the second ring. Her voice was professional but warm, the voice of someone who had spent years dealing with frightened women in crisis. "Miss Holloway, how can I help you?" "I was assaulted last night by my boyfriend. He broke my arm." A brief pause. "Have you been to the hospital?" Yes, I have documentation. X-rays, photos of the bruises, the doctors report. Good, that's good. Can you tell me who your boyfriend is? Meredith took a deep breath. Dalton Ashford. His father is Councilman Ashford and his uncle is Judge Ashford. Another pause, longer this time. When Vivian spoke again, her voice had changed, sharper, more focused. I know the family. Are you aware of what you're getting into, Miss Holloway? I've done my research. I know about Lauren Whitmore and Nina Calloway. I know the Ashfords have covered up his behavior before, and I know they'll try to destroy me if I come forward. They will, Vivian said simply. I won't lie to you about that. Cases like this are brutal. The defense will attack your character, your mental health, every relationship you've ever had. They'll hire private investigators to dig up anything they can use against you. And they'll have resources that we can only dream of matching. I understand. Do you? Because once we start this, there's no going back. The Ashfords will know you're coming for them and they'll respond accordingly. You'll need to be prepared for the worst. Meredith looked at her casted arm, at the bruises still visible on her wrists, at the woman in the mirror who had spent 2 years being someone's victim. I'm prepared, she said. What do I need to do? Vivian's voice softened. Can you come to my office tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock? Bring all the documentation you have, the hospital records, any texts or emails from Dalton, anything that shows a pattern of behavior. And bring someone you trust if you can. A family member or friend. You shouldn't have to do this alone. I'll be there. Good. And Ms. Holloway, what you're doing is incredibly brave. I want you to know that. The words caught Meredith off guard. Brave. She didn't feel brave. She felt terrified, exhausted, and completely out of her depth. But she also felt something else. Something that had been missing from her life for a very long time. Hope. Thank you, she said. I'll see you tomorrow. She hung up the phone and found Garrett standing in the doorway watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Well, he asked. Tomorrow at 10. She wants me to bring documentation and someone I trust. I'll clear my schedule. Meredith shook her head. You can come, but I need you to let me do the talking. This is my fight, Garrett. I need to be the one leading it. He studied her for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. Okay, but I'm still going to be there every step of the way. I know. She managed a small smile. That's what brothers are for. That night, Meredith couldn't sleep. She lay in the guest bedroom of Garrett's house listening to the sounds of the desert outside the window. Coyotes howling in the distance, the whisper of wind through the scrub brush, the occasional rumble of a motorcycle passing on the highway. Her arm ached beneath the cast, but the pain was becoming familiar now. Almost welcome. It reminded her that she was alive, that she had survived, that she was still fighting. She thought about the meeting tomorrow, about Vivian Caldwell and the legal battle ahead, about the Ashfords and their power, their money, their willingness to destroy anyone who threatened their son. She thought about Lauren Whitmore and Nina Calloway, two women who had been where she was now, two women who had chosen to run instead of fight. She didn't blame them. She understood better than anyone how terrifying it was to stand up against someone like Dalton, how easy it would be to disappear, to start over somewhere new, to pretend that none of this had ever happened. But she also understood something else now. Running wasn't safety. It was just a different kind of prison. A lifetime of looking over her shoulder, of jumping at shadows, of knowing that her abuser was still out there, still hurting people, still winning. She wasn't going to run. She was going to fight. And somehow, against all odds, she was going to win. The sun rose over the Arizona desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Meredith watched the colors shift through the window and felt something settle inside her. A resolve, a determination that hadn't been there 24 hours ago. She had been broken, but broken things could be mended. Broken things could be made stronger. Dalton Ashford had underestimated her. He had seen her fear and assumed it was weakness. He had seen her silence and assumed it was submission. He had broken her arm and assumed it would break her spirit. He was wrong. Meredith Holloway was done being a victim, done being silent, done being afraid. Today she would start fighting back, and she wouldn't stop until she had taken back everything Dalton had stolen from her. Her dignity, her voice, her life. It was time to become someone new, someone stronger, someone who didn't back down. It was time to become a survivor. 2 weeks had passed since the night Dalton Ashford broke Meredith Holloway's arm. 14 days of healing, 14 days of planning, 14 days of slowly, painfully rebuilding the woman she used to be before she met the man who had nearly destroyed her. The morning sun filtered through the windows of a yoga studio on the east side of Phoenix, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. Meredith sat on a mat near the back of the room, her casted arm resting awkwardly against her side, trying to follow the instructor's movements with her one good hand. She couldn't do most of the poses, not with her injury, but that wasn't why she was here. She was here because this was the first thing she had done for herself in 2 years. The first activity that belonged entirely to her, that Dalton hadn't approved or controlled or monitored. The simple act of walking into this studio and signing up for a class had felt like rebellion. And rebellion, Meredith was learning, was the first step toward freedom. The instructor, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair, had noticed Meredith's cast on the first day. She hadn't asked questions. She had simply modified the poses, offered gentle encouragement, and created a space where Meredith could exist without explanation or apology. It was such a small thing, such an ordinary kindness, but after 2 years of walking on eggshells, of measuring every word and gesture against Dalton's unpredictable moods, ordinary kindness felt like a miracle. After class, Meredith drove to her therapist's office. Dr. Emerson was a man in his 60s with calm, patient eyes that had seen every kind of human suffering. He specialized in trauma, particularly trauma inflicted by intimate partners, and he had a waiting list that stretched months into the future. Vivian Caldwell had made one phone call, and Meredith had been seen within 48 hours. The sessions were brutal. Dr. Emerson didn't believe in gentle approaches or comfortable silences. He asked direct questions and expected honest answers. He pushed Meredith to examine the patterns that had led her to Dalton, the warning signs she had ignored, the lies she had told herself to justify staying. It was painful work. Some days Meredith left the office feeling worse than when she had arrived. But underneath the pain, something was shifting. The fog that had clouded her thinking for 2 years was beginning to lift. She was starting to see clearly again. "Tell me about the first time he hurt you," Dr. Emerson said during their third session. "Not the broken arm, the first time." Meredith closed her eyes and let herself remember. It was about 3 months into the relationship. We were at a restaurant, and the waiter was being friendly. Too friendly, according to Dalton. He didn't say anything at dinner, but when we got to his car, he grabbed my wrist and squeezed until I thought the bones would crack. What did he say? He said I had embarrassed him, that I had been flirting, that if I ever did it again, there would be consequences. "And what did you do?" The shame washed over her, hot and familiar. "I apologized. I told him I hadn't meant anything by it. I promised to be more careful." Why? The question hung in the air. Meredith struggled to find words for something she had never consciously examined. "Because I thought it was my fault. Because I believed him when he said I had done something wrong. Because I was already so deep into the relationship that I couldn't imagine walking away over something that seemed so small." Dr. Emerson nodded slowly. "That's how it starts. Small incidents that don't seem worth fighting over. Apologies that become a habit, a slow erosion of your boundaries until you don't remember where they used to be." "I feel so stupid." "You're not stupid. You were manipulated by someone who had a lot of practice. Dalton Ashford didn't become an abuser overnight. He's been refining his techniques for years. You were simply his latest target." The words hit Meredith like a bucket of cold water. His latest target, not his only victim, not a unique failure on her part. Just one woman in a long line of women who had fallen for the same lies. "How do I make sure I never fall for it again?" Dr. Emerson leaned forward. "By understanding how it happened, by recognizing the patterns, by rebuilding your sense of self until you're strong enough to walk away at the first warning sign, not the 20th. That afternoon, Meredith drove to a small art studio in downtown Phoenix. She had taken painting classes in college back before her life had narrowed to the dimensions of Dalton's expectations. She had been good at it, or at least she had enjoyed it, which was perhaps more important. Dalton had dismissed her artistic interests as a waste of time, and gradually, like everything else he disapproved of painting, had faded from her life. Now she was reclaiming it. The studio was run by a retired art teacher named Eleanor, a woman in her 70s with paint-stained fingers and an infectious laugh. She didn't care about talent or technique. She cared about expression, about feeling, about the courage it took to put something of yourself onto canvas. Meredith worked with her one good hand, creating abstract shapes and colors that didn't represent anything specific. It was clumsy and imperfect, but it was hers. Every brushstroke was a small act of defiance against the man who had tried to reduce her to nothing. While she painted, she thought about the case. Vivian Caldwell had been clear about the challenges ahead. The Ashfords were already mounting their defense. Private investigators had been hired to dig into Meredith's past. Lawyers were preparing motions to dismiss, to delay, to bury the complaint in procedural quicksand. But Vivian was not easily intimidated. She had faced powerful families before, and she had won. More importantly, she had resources of her own. A network of investigators, journalists, and advocates who specialized in exposing abusers who hid behind wealth and influence. The first step was building an unassailable case. That meant documentation, evidence, a timeline of abuse that left no room for doubt or denial. Meredith had spent hours reconstructing her relationship with Dalton, working backward from the broken arm to the first warning signs. She had saved every text message, every email, every piece of communication that showed his controlling behavior. She had photographed the bruises that still marked her body, the medical records from the emergency room, the threatening message he had sent after she fled. It was a painful process. Every memory she examined was a wound reopened, but it was also empowering. For 2 years, she had been a passive participant in her own life, reacting to Dalton's moods, anticipating his rages, trying to keep the peace at any cost. Now she was taking action, building something, fighting back. The difference was everything. The first sign of the trouble came at the end of the second week. Meredith was sitting in Vivian's office reviewing the case file when the lawyer's phone rang. Vivian answered, listened for a long moment, and then her expression changed. The professional calm that she wore like armor cracked, revealing something harder underneath. "I understand," she said. "No, I understand. Thank you for letting me know." She hung up the phone and looked at Meredith with eyes that held a warning. That was Lauren Whitmore's lawyer. "She's withdrawing her cooperation." The words took a moment to process. Lauren Whitmore, one of Dalton's previous victims, a woman who had agreed tentatively to provide a statement supporting the pattern of abuse. What happened? Someone got to her. A private investigator showed up at her workplace yesterday, started asking questions about her past, her mental health, her relationship history. Her boss called her in this morning and suggested she might want to find employment elsewhere. Meredith felt the blood drain from her face. They got her fired. Not directly, but the implication was clear. Cooperate with us and your life becomes very difficult. Vivian's jaw tightened. It's a classic intimidation tactic. Attack the witnesses before they can testify. What about Nina Calloway? I'm trying to reach her now, but if they got to Lauren, they've probably gotten to Nina too. The hope that had been building in Meredith's chest flickered and dimmed. Without the other victims, her case became much harder to prove. One woman's word against the son of a councilman, with no pattern of behavior, to establish no corroborating testimony to support her claims. So that's it. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. They win. Vivian's eyes flashed. They don't win until we stop fighting, and I don't stop fighting. But without witnesses, we have a harder road, not an impossible one. Vivian leaned forward, her gaze intense. The Ashfords are counting on you to give up. They're counting on fear and intimidation to do what the legal system can't. Every case I've ever won has faced these same tactics. The only difference between victory and defeat is whether my clients have the courage to keep going. Meredith thought about Lauren Whitmore running from Phoenix to Seattle trying to start over. About Nina Calloway hiding in Denver living with the weight of her silence. About all the women who had come before and all the women who would come after. What do? We find another way. We document everything, the intimidation, the private investigators, the threats. If they want to play dirty, we make sure the jury knows exactly how dirty they're willing to play. But even as Vivian spoke, Meredith could hear the uncertainty beneath the confidence. This case was slipping away. The Ashfords were winning before the fight had even begun, unless someone changed the equation. That night, Meredith sat alone in Garrett's guest bedroom, staring at her laptop screen. Lauren Whitmore's Facebook profile was still dark as it had been since her relationship with Dalton ended. But her LinkedIn showed a new location, Portland, Oregon. She had moved again, putting even more distance between herself and Phoenix. Nina Calloway was harder to track. Her social media presence had been scrubbed clean, probably by professionals hired for exactly that purpose. But Meredith had found an old email address in a forum post one that Nina had used before she learned to hide. She typed a message to Lauren first. Brief, direct, honest. "My name is Meredith Holloway. Dalton Ashford broke my arm 3 weeks ago. I know you dated him, and I know what he did to you. I'm not asking you to testify. I'm just asking you to talk to me. Please." She sent a similar message to Nina's old email, not knowing if it would even reach her. Then she closed the laptop and stared at the ceiling. Garrett found her like that an hour later. Can't sleep. Can't stop thinking. He sat down in the chair beside the bed, his massive frame somehow looking less threatening in the soft light of the bedside lamp. About what? About Lauren and Nina. About how scared they must have been. about how easy it would be to just disappear like they did. Garrett was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that surprised her. I used to think running was for cowards. When I was younger, when I first joined the club, I thought the only way to handle a problem was head on. No retreat, no surrender. What changed? I got older. Saw what happens to men who never learned to pick their battles. Some of them are dead. Some of them are in prison. Some of them are just broken, living out their days with nothing but regret for company. He looked at his scarred hands, knuckles permanently swollen from years of violence. Running isn't always cowardice, Mary. Sometimes it's survival. Sometimes it's the smartest thing you can do. Is that what you think I should do, run? Garrett met her eyes. I think you should do whatever keeps you alive and whole. If that means fighting, I'll fight beside you. If that means running, I'll help you disappear. The only thing I won't do is watch you get destroyed. Meredith considered his words. He wasn't wrong. Running was an option. She had enough savings to start over somewhere new, somewhere the Ashfords couldn't reach. She could change her name, build a new life, leave all of this behind. But she would also be leaving Lauren and Nina behind, and every woman who came after them. I can't run, she said finally. Not because I'm brave, because I don't think I could live with myself if I did. Garrett studied her face for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. Okay, then we figure out how to win. 3 days later, Meredith's phone rang. The number was unfamiliar with the Denver area code. Her heart jumped as she answered. This is Meredith. My name is Nina Calloway. The voice was quiet, cautious, carrying the weight of years of fear. I got your email. Meredith sat down heavily, her legs suddenly weak. Thank you for calling. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't. I've spent 3 years trying to forget that Dalton Ashford exists. Getting your email brought everything back. I'm sorry. Don't be. Nina paused and Meredith heard her taking a deep breath. I've been following the news. I saw that you filed a complaint. I know what that took. The case is in trouble. The Ashfords are threatening witnesses. Lauren Whitmore backed out. I know. They reached out to me too. A private investigator showed up at my apartment building last week asking the neighbors questions about me. Meredith's stomach dropped. Are you okay? I'm scared. Nina's voice cracked slightly. I've been scared for 3 years, but I'm also tired. Tired of hiding. Tired of pretending it never happened. Tired of knowing he's still out there doing to other women what he did to me. I understand. No, I don't think you do. Not yet. Give it a few years. Give it a few years of waking up from nightmares of flinching when someone raises their voice, of looking over your shoulder every time you walk to your car. Then you'll understand. The words were harsh, but there was no malice in them. Just truth. I'm sorry, Meredith said again, for what he did to you, for what you've been through. I'm sorry for what he did to you. Nina was quiet for a moment. I've been thinking a lot since I got your email, about what it would mean to come forward, about whether I have the strength to face him again. I'm not asking you to decide anything right now. I just wanted you to know that you're not alone, that there are other women who know what he is. I know. I've known for years. I just didn't think it would ever matter. Nina's voice hardened slightly. But maybe it matters now. Maybe if enough of us speak up, someone will finally listen. Does that mean? It means I'm thinking about it. That's all I can promise. I'm thinking about it. They talked for another hour. Nina shared details of her relationship with Dalton, the gradual escalation from charm to control to violence. It was Meredith's story repeated with different names and places. The same patterns, the same manipulation, the same devastating conclusion. By the time they hung up, Meredith felt something she hadn't expected. Connection. For 2 years, she had been isolated, cut off from anyone who might understand what she was going through. Now she had found someone who knew. Someone who had survived the same nightmare and come out the other side. She wasn't alone anymore. A week later, Meredith flew to Portland. Lauren Whitmore had finally responded to her messages. Not with agreement, not with promises, but with a simple question, can we meet in person? Garrett had wanted to come with her. So had Sully, who had been spending more and more time at the house lately, but Meredith had insisted on going alone. This is between us, she explained. Between women who have been through the same thing. If I show up with men, even men who want to help, it changes the dynamic. They had accepted her reasoning reluctantly, but Meredith knew they were tracking. Her flight probably had contacts in Portland, ready to intervene if anything went wrong. It was overprotective and unnecessary, and exactly what she would have expected from her brother. She smiled at the thought. Lauren was waiting at a coffee shop near the waterfront, a woman in her early 30s with dark hair and eyes that held the same guarded watchfulness Meredith saw in her own mirror. They recognized each other instantly. Not from photographs or social media, but from something deeper, a shared knowledge, a common wound. Thank you for meeting me, Meredith said as she sat down. I almost didn't. Lauren's hands wrapped around her coffee cup like a shield. I've spent 4 years trying to build a new life, a safe life. Coming forward would destroy all of that. I know. Do you know what it's like to have private investigators following you? To have your coworkers whispering about you, to watch everything you've built crumble because some powerful family decided to make you pay for telling the truth. I'm starting to learn. Lauren studied her face. You're different than I expected. When I read about you in the news, I thought you'd be, I don't know, angrier, more aggressive. I'm angry. I'm furious. But I've learned that anger alone doesn't win cases. Strategy does. Patience does. Solidarity does. Solidarity. Lauren laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's a nice word. But it doesn't stop private investigators from showing up at your job. It doesn't stop anonymous threats in your mailbox. It doesn't stop the nightmares. No, it doesn't. But maybe it helps us survive them. They talked for 3 hours. Lauren shared her story, the full version, not the sanitized account she had given to lawyers. The escalation from controlling behavior to physical violence. The night Dalton had choked her until she lost consciousness. The terror of waking up alone, not knowing if he would come back to finish what he started. She had fled Phoenix that night with nothing but the clothes on her back and $200 in cash. She had spent months rebuilding therapy, new job, new apartment, new identity. And just when she thought she was safe, Meredith's case had brought everything back. I'm not brave, Lauren said finally. I want you to understand that. I ran because I was terrified. I stayed silent because I was terrified. Every decision I've made has been driven by fear. Fear isn't weakness. Fear is what kept you alive. Maybe. But it also kept me silent while he hurt other women, while he hurt you. The words hung between them, heavy with guilt and regret. You didn't hurt me, Meredith said quietly. He did. The only person responsible for his actions is him. Lauren's eyes filled with tears. I know that. Logically, I know that. But I still feel like I failed. Like I could have stopped him if I had just been stronger. You were strong enough to survive. That's not nothing. They sat in silence for a long moment. Then Lauren reached across the table and took Meredith's hand. I can't promise anything. The fear is still there every day, every hour. But I'm tired of letting it control me. I'm tired of hiding. What are you saying? I'm saying I'll think about it. Really think about it. Not just say no because it's easier. It wasn't a yes, but it was more than Meredith had dared to hope for. The confrontation came 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday afternoon that had started like any other. Meredith was in the kitchen of Garrett's house preparing lunch with her one good hand when she heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. She recognized the engine immediately, the low purr of an expensive European car, the kind of car that cost more than most people made in a year. Dalton's car. Her blood turned to ice. For a moment, she was frozen, trapped in the paralysis of fear that had defined her life for 2 years. Every instinct screamed at her to hide, to run, to make herself small until the danger passed. But then she heard another sound. Garrett's boots on the porch, his voice low and dangerous. Get off my property. I'm just here to talk. Dalton's voice was smooth, confident, carrying the easy arrogance of a man who had never faced consequences for anything in his life. Meredith and I have some things to discuss. She has nothing to say to you. That's for her to decide, isn't it? Unless you're keeping her prisoner here. Meredith moved toward the door. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears, but her feet kept moving. Step by step, breath by breath. She reached the porch and saw them facing off in the driveway. Garrett massive and coiled with barely contained violence. Dalton lean and polished in his expensive suit, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. He saw her and his expression shifted. Something that might have been surprise flickered across his features, quickly replaced by the familiar mask of charm. Meredith, you look well. She said nothing. I've been trying to reach you. We need to talk about this misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. You broke my arm. You've been threatening me. There's nothing to discuss. I made a mistake. I admit that. But mistakes can be forgiven. We can work through this together like we always have. The audacity of his words hit her like a physical blow. Like we always have. As if the past 2 years had been a partnership rather than a prison. As if the bruises and the fear and the broken bone had been shared struggles instead of deliberate cruelties. Leave. Meredith, please. Let's just talk. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. Garrett stepped forward, his hands curling into fists. She told you to leave. Dalton's eyes flickered to him, and for just a moment the mask slipped. Beneath the charm, beneath the polish, Meredith saw something ugly. Something calculating. Something that had been planning this moment for weeks. I'm not talking to you, Dalton said to Garrett. I'm talking to my girlfriend. Ex-girlfriend. The word felt powerful in Meredith's mouth. And I have nothing to say to you, not now, not ever. You're making a mistake. My family has resources you can't imagine. They're already investigating your past, your brother's criminal record, your mental health. By the time they're done, no one will believe a word you say. Then let them investigate. Let them dig up whatever they want. The truth is the truth, and no amount of money can change that. Something shifted in Dalton's expression. The charm faded, completely replaced by the cold rage she had seen so many times before. You think you can win this? You think you can take on my family and survive? I'll destroy you, Meredith. I'll destroy everyone you love. And when it's over, you'll wish you had never met me. Garrett moved. One moment he was standing beside Meredith. The next he was inches from Dalton's face, his scarred hands reaching for the other man's throat. Garrett, no. Meredith's voice cut through the red haze of her brother's rage. He stopped, trembling with the effort of restraint, his eyes locked on Dalton's. That's what you want, isn't it? Meredith stepped forward, placing herself between the two men. You want him to hit you. You want him to give you something you can use against us. Some excuse to play the victim. Dalton's smirk returned, but it was brittle now. She had seen through him. You're smarter than I gave you credit for. I was always smart. I just stopped showing it around you because you didn't like it when I was smarter than you. The words hit him harder than any fist could have. She saw it in the way his jaw tightened, the way his hands clenched at his sides. You'll regret this. Maybe, but I'll regret it on my own terms, not yours. She looked at him, then really looked, and saw him clearly for the first time. Not the charming man who had swept her off her feet. Not the volatile partner she had learned to fear. Just a small, insecure person who could only feel powerful by making others feel weak. Go home, Dalton, and don't come back, because if you do, I won't stop my brother again. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Dalton turned and walked back to his car, his shoulders stiff with anger and humiliation. The engine roared to life, and he tore out of the driveway, leaving a cloud of dust in his wake. Garrett let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for hours. How did you do that? Do what? Stop me. I was about to kill him. I could feel it. And then your voice, and it just stopped. Meredith looked at her hands. They were shaking, but she felt strangely calm. I didn't want to lose you, and I didn't want to give him the satisfaction. Garrett pulled her into a careful hug, mindful of her injured arm. I'm proud of you, Mary. What you did just now, standing up to him like that. That took guts. It took practice, months of therapy and yoga, and learning to trust my own voice again. Whatever it took, it worked. He expected you to crumble, and you didn't. She leaned into her brothers in embrace and felt something release inside her. Some last holdout of fear, some final thread connecting her to the woman she had been. That woman was gone now. In her place stood someone new, someone stronger, someone who didn't back down. In the weeks that followed, Meredith began to notice Sully Barrett in a different way. He had always been there in the background, a quiet presence at Garrett's side. She had known him for years in the peripheral way you know your brother's friends, a face at holiday dinners, a voice on the phone when Garrett wasn't available, a reliable fixture in a world that often felt unreliable. But now she saw him clearly. He brought her coffee in the mornings, remembering exactly how she liked it without ever asking. He drove her to therapy appointments when Garrett was busy sitting in the parking lot without complaint, never asking about what happened inside. He helped her practice the painting techniques she was learning, his own fingers surprisingly deft for someone who had spent his life working with engines and weapons. He was patient in a way that Dalton had never been. Not the false patience of a man waiting for an opportunity, but genuine patience. The patience of someone who had nowhere else to be. One evening, they sat on Garrett's porch watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of fire. Can I ask you something? Meredith's voice was quiet, contemplative. Anything. Why are you still here? You've been at this house almost every day for 2 months. Don't you have your own life to live? Sully was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that caught her off guard. I had a sister once, younger than me like you and Garrett. She got involved with a man who hurt her. By the time I found out, it was too late. Meredith felt her breath catch. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago, but I made a promise to myself. If I ever had a chance to help someone in the same situation, I wouldn't hesitate. Is that why you're here? Because I remind you of your sister? Sully turned to look at her, and there was something in his eyes that made her heart skip. At first, maybe, but that's not why I stayed. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. Then Meredith looked away, not ready to explore what she was feeling. Thank you, she said softly, for being here, for not expecting anything in return. I don't expect anything. But if you ever want more, then all you have to do is ask. She didn't respond, but she didn't need to. Some things were understood without words. The breakthrough came 4 months after the night Dalton broke Meredith's arm. Lauren Whitmore called first, her voice steady with a resolve that hadn't been there before. I'm in. Whatever you need me to do, I'm in. 2 hours later, Nina Calloway called with the same message. I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired of hiding. Let's finish this. Vivian Caldwell assembled them in her office the following week. 3 women who had never met in person, but who shared a bond deeper than friendship. They sat together looking at each other with recognition and understanding, 3 survivors of the same storm. Before we proceed, Vivian said, I need you all to understand what you're signing up for. The Ashfords will come after you with everything they have. Your past will be scrutinized, your mental health questioned, your characters assassinated. This will be the hardest thing you've ever done. Lauren spoke first. Harder than being choked until I blacked out. Harder than running across the country with nothing but the clothes on my back. Harder than years of therapy trying to convince myself I wasn't crazy, Nina added. Harder than looking over my shoulder every day wondering if he found me. Meredith looked at her casted arm, finally scheduled to come off next week. Harder than hearing my own bone break while the man who claimed to love me smiled. Vivian nodded slowly, something like admiration in her eyes. Then let's begin. The press conference was held on a Friday morning in front of the Maricopa County Courthouse. Vivian had chosen the location deliberately, a message to the Ashfords that they were no longer operating in shadows. 3 women stood before a crowd of reporters, their faces pale but determined. Behind them a banner read, Breaking the Silence, Survivors of Dalton Ashford Speak Out. Meredith stepped up to the microphone first. My name is Meredith Holloway. 4 months ago, my boyfriend, Dalton Ashford, broke my arm. This was not an accident. This was not a misunderstanding. This was the culmination of 2 years of physical, emotional, and psychological abuse. She paused, letting the words sink in. I'm not alone. There are other women who have suffered at Dalton Ashford's hands. Women who were silenced, threatened, intimidated into staying quiet. Today we're done being silent. Today we're telling our stories, and we're asking for justice. Lauren spoke next, her voice shaking but clear. Then Nina, her words carrying the weight of years of hidden pain. The cameras flashed. The reporters shouted questions. And somewhere in the city, the Ashford family watched their carefully constructed world begin to crumble. That evening, Dalton Ashford was arrested at his family's estate. The charge was assault causing bodily harm. Bail was set at $500,000. Meredith watched the news coverage from Garrett's living room, surrounded by the people who had carried her through the darkest months of her life. Her brother, Sully, Vivian, even Lauren and Nina, who had flown in to stand beside her. On the screen, Dalton was led from his parents' mansion in handcuffs, his face a mask of disbelief and rage. The golden boy had finally fallen. How do you feel? Sully asked quietly. Meredith considered the question carefully. I feel like I'm finally waking up from a nightmare. Like the world is real again for the first time in years. She looked at the cast on her arm scheduled to come off in 3 days. Underneath it, her bone had healed. Crooked, the doctor said, but strong. Stronger than before in some ways. Like her. Garrett put his arm around her shoulders. It's not over yet. The trial will be hard. The Ashfords won't go down without a fight. I know. Meredith leaned into her brother's embrace. But for the first time, I believe we can win. Because we're not fighting alone anymore. She looked around the room at the faces of the people who had stood beside her, people who had believed her when she didn't believe herself. People who had held her up when she wanted to collapse. She was not a victim anymore. She was a warrior. And the battle was just beginning. The headline ran on every news station in Arizona. Councilman's son accused of serial domestic abuse. 3 women come forward. Meredith Holloway sat in the living room of her brother's house and watched the story unfold on the television screen. 6 months had passed since the night Dalton Ashford broke her arm. 6 months of healing, of therapy, of slowly rebuilding the woman she used to be. And now, finally, the world was learning what she had known all along. The monster had been hiding in plain sight. The coverage was relentless. Local news stations led with the story every evening. National outlets picked it up within days. Social media exploded with commentary, some supportive, some skeptical, all of it overwhelming. But the most significant development came from within the Ashford family itself. Councilman Harold Ashford held a press conference 3 days after the story broke. He stood behind a podium bearing the city seal, his face a mask of practiced solemnity, and delivered a statement that had clearly been crafted by expensive lawyers. Recent allegations have been made against my son Dalton Ashford. While I believe in the presumption of innocence, I also believe that every accusation of this nature must be taken seriously. To avoid any appearance of conflict of interest, I am recusing myself from all city council matters that might be connected to this case. Furthermore, I want to make clear that I will not use my position or influence to interfere with the legal process in any way. He paused, his jaw tight with barely concealed anger. I love my son, but I also respect the law. The truth will come out in court. It was a careful statement. It's designed to distance himself from Dalton without abandoning him entirely. But Meredith knew what it really meant. The Ashfords were cutting their losses. They had calculated the political cost of defending their son and decided it was too high. Judge Raymond Ashford followed his brother's lead the next day, announcing his recusal from any case even tangentially related to the allegations. He spoke about integrity and the importance of maintaining public trust in the judicial system. He did not mention his nephew by name. The walls were crumbling. Dalton Ashford out on $500,000. Bale found himself increasingly isolated. The friends who had once crowded around him at expensive restaurants now avoided his calls. The business associates who had sought his family's favor now pretended they had never met him. The golden boy had become a pariah. Meredith felt no satisfaction in his fall, only a grim determination to see it through to the end. The trial was scheduled for the following month. Vivian Caldwell had built a case that was as close to airtight as any domestic violence prosecution could be. Medical records, photographs, text messages, the testimony of 3 women who had experienced the same pattern of abuse, expert witnesses who would explain the psychology of intimate partner violence to a jury that might otherwise be skeptical. But Vivian had also warned Meredith about what was coming. The defense will try to destroy your credibility. They'll dig into your past, your mental health, your relationships. They'll suggest that you're lying, that you're unstable, that you're part of a conspiracy to bring down a prominent family. You need to be prepared for that. Meredith was prepared. She had spent 6 months preparing in therapy and in quiet moments of reflection. She knew who she was now. She knew what she had survived. And she knew that no amount of character assassination could change the fundamental truth of her story. But there was one thing she needed to do before the trial began. She needed to face him, one last time, on her own terms. The request came as a surprise to everyone. Meredith announced it at dinner 3 weeks before the trial was scheduled to start. Garrett nearly choked on his beer. You want to what? I want to meet with Dalton before the trial, just the 2 of us in a supervised setting. Garrett's face cycled through disbelief, confusion, and finally anger. Absolutely not. Why would you put yourself through that? Why would you give him any opportunity to manipulate you again? Because I need to. Meredith's voice was calm but firm. I need to look him in the eye and tell him what he did to me. Not in a courtroom, not through lawyers, not filtered through legal procedure. I need to say it directly to his face. Sully, who had been quiet throughout the meal, spoke up. Is this about closure? Because closure is overrated. Sometimes it's better to just walk away. It's not about closure. Meredith looked at the man who had become so important to her over the past months. It's about power. For 2 years, Dalton had all the power in our relationship. He controlled everything: what I wore, who I saw, how I felt about myself. Even after I left, even after I started fighting back, some part of me still felt like he had power over me. She paused, gathering her thoughts. I need to take that power back. I need to stand in front of him and show him that I'm not afraid anymore, that he doesn't control me, that he never will again. Garrett shook his head. Mary, this is crazy. What if he says something that gets in your head? What if he finds some way to hurt you? He can't hurt me anymore. Not unless I let him. Meredith met her brother's eyes. My whole life I've had men protecting me. You when we were kids, Dalton in his twisted way, Sully these past few months, and I'm grateful for all of it. But this is something I need to do alone. I need to know that I can face him without anyone else fighting my battles. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Sully reached across the table and took her hand. If this is what you need, then we support you. But we'll be right outside that room ready to come in if anything goes wrong. Garrett grumbled but didn't argue. He had learned over these long months that his sister was no longer the fragile woman who had called him crying at 2 in the morning. She had become something stronger. Something he didn't fully understand but was learning to respect. The meeting was arranged for the following week. Vivian had negotiated the terms with Dalton's lawyers, a conference room at a neutral location. Two lawyers present as observers, one from each side. No physical contact. The conversation would be recorded, but not admissible in court. Both parties could end the meeting at any time. Dalton had agreed immediately. Of course he had. He still believed he could manipulate her. He still thought that if he could just talk to her alone, he could find the right words to make her back down. He was wrong. The conference room was small and sterile with white walls and a rectangular table surrounded by uncomfortable chairs. Meredith arrived first, flanked by Vivian, and followed at a distance by Garrett and Sully, who took up positions in the hallway outside. She sat down at the table and waited. 10 minutes later, the door opened and Dalton Ashford walked in. He looked different than she remembered. Thinner, paler. The easy confidence that had once defined him was gone, replaced by something harder and more desperate. Prison was looming, and even a man as privileged as Dalton Ashford couldn't ignore its shadow. He sat down across from her, his lawyer taking a seat beside him. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Dalton smiled, that familiar smile, the one that had charmed her at a charity gala 3 years ago, the one that had made her believe she was the luckiest woman in the world. "Meredith, you look good." She said nothing. "I've been wanting to talk to you for months, to explain, to apologize. I know I made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but if you would just listen." "I'm not here to listen to your apologies." Her voice was steady, almost conversational. "I'm here to tell you something." The smile faltered slightly. This wasn't going according to his script. "Tell me what—" Meredith took a breath. She had rehearsed this moment 100 times in her mind, but now that it was here, the words came naturally. They had been waiting inside her for years, building pressure, demanding release. "You broke my arm, but that's not what you really broke." Dalton started to speak, but she held up her hand. "Don't, I'm not finished." He closed his mouth, something flickering in his eyes, surprise perhaps, or the first stirrings of fear. "You broke my trust. You made me believe that I was crazy, that I was the problem, that everything wrong in our relationship was my fault. You isolated me from everyone who cared about me. You made me feel so small and worthless that I forgot I had ever been anything else." Her voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath the surface. "I spent 2 years walking on eggshells trying to predict your moods, trying to avoid your anger. I apologized for things I didn't do. I made excuses for things you did. I lied to my family, my friends, myself, because I was so deep in your world that I couldn't see any way out." Dalton's expression was shifting now. The charm was fading, replaced by irritation. "Meredith, this is ridiculous. I never meant to—" "I don't care what you meant. I care about what you did." She leaned forward slightly. "You put your hands on me. You squeezed my wrists until they bruised. You shoved me against walls. You choked me until I saw stars. And finally, you twisted my arm until you heard the bone snap. That was an accident. Nothing you did to me was an accident. It was a pattern, a system, a way of keeping me under your control." Meredith's eyes never left his face. "And the worst part is it worked. For 2 years, I was exactly what you wanted me to be. Afraid, compliant, silent." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. "But I'm not silent anymore." Dalton's mask cracked completely now. The charming facade crumbled, revealing the cold anger that had always lurked beneath. "You're making a mistake. My lawyers will tear you apart on the stand. They'll prove you're a liar, that you're mentally unstable, that this whole thing is a scheme to get money from my family. Let them try. You think you've won something here? You think this press conference, this trial, any of it matters? I'll be out in 2 years, maybe less, and when I am, I'll remember this. I'll remember everything you've done." The threat hung in the air, naked and ugly. Meredith looked at the man she had once loved and saw him clearly, perhaps for the first time. He was small. Underneath the expensive suits and the family name and the practiced charm, he was just a small, frightened man who could only feel powerful by making others feel weak. "You know what I remember," she said quietly. "I remember lying on the floor of our apartment with my arm bent the wrong way, listening to you tell me it was my fault. I remember believing you. I remember thinking that if I just tried harder, loved better, was more of what you wanted, you would stop hurting me." She shook her head slowly. "I was wrong. There's nothing I could have done to stop you, because the problem was never me. The problem was always you." Meredith stood up. "I'm done being afraid of you, Dalton. I'm done letting you live in my head. Whatever happens in that courtroom, whatever the jury decides, you've already lost. Because you can't hurt me anymore. You can't control me. You can't make me feel small." She looked down at him one last time. Goodbye, Dalton. I hope you find the help you need, but I won't be there to see it. I'll be too busy living my life. She turned and walked toward the door. You'll regret this. His voice followed her, stripped of all pretense, now raw with fury. I'll make sure you regret this. Meredith didn't turn around. She didn't respond. She just opened the door and walked through it, leaving Dalton Ashford behind her forever. In the hallway, Garrett and Sully were waiting. They saw her face and knew immediately that something had changed. Are you okay? Sully asked. Meredith thought about the question. She had just confronted the man who had terrorized her for 2 years. She had said everything she needed to say. She had walked away on her own terms. I'm better than okay, her voice was steady. I'm free. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The prosecution called Meredith first. She sat on the witness stand and told her story from the first warning signs to the night Dalton broke her arm. She described the pattern of abuse in clinical detail, her voice never wavering, her eyes never leaving the jury. The defense attorney tried everything. He suggested that Meredith had provoked the violence. He implied that she was mentally unstable. He pointed to her brother's criminal record and suggested that her entire family was prone to exaggeration and dishonesty. Meredith answered every question with the same calm directness. She didn't get angry. She didn't cry. She simply told the truth and let it speak for itself. Lauren Whitmore testified next. She told the jury about her 8-month relationship with Dalton, about the escalating violence, about the night he had choked her until she lost consciousness. She described fleeing Phoenix with nothing but the clothes on her back, spending years looking over her shoulder, afraid that he would find her. Nina Calloway followed. Her testimony was quieter, more hesitant, but no less powerful. She spoke about the manipulation, the gaslighting, the way Dalton had made her question her own sanity. She described the years of therapy it had taken to understand that she wasn't crazy, that she had been systematically abused by a man who knew exactly what he was doing. 3 women, 3 stories, 1 unmistakable pattern. The defense tried to discredit each of them. They hired expert witnesses to question the reliability of traumatic memories. They suggested that the women had coordinated their testimonies, that they were working together to bring down a wealthy family for financial gain. But the jury wasn't buying it. Meredith could see it in their faces during the closing arguments. The way they looked at Dalton with barely concealed disgust. The way they nodded along as the prosecutor outlined the pattern of abuse. The way they avoided eye contact with the defense attorney as he made his final desperate plea for acquittal. The verdict came on a Thursday afternoon. Guilty. Guilty on all charges: assault causing bodily harm, criminal harassment, witness intimidation. The jury had deliberated for less than 4 hours. Meredith sat in the courtroom and listened to the judge read the verdict. She heard the gasps from the Ashford family section. She saw Dalton's face go pale with shock and then red with fury. But mostly she felt something release inside her. A weight she had been carrying for years lifted at last. The sentencing came 2 weeks later. 5 years in state prison. A restraining order that would last for the rest of his life. Mandatory counseling upon release. And perhaps most importantly, a criminal record that would follow him forever. Dalton Ashford was no longer a golden boy. He was just another convicted abuser facing the consequences of his actions. As the bailiffs led him from the courtroom, he looked back at Meredith one last time. His eyes were filled with hatred, with promises of revenge, with all the ugliness he had hidden behind his charming smile. Meredith met his gaze and felt nothing. No fear, no anger, no satisfaction. Just peace. She stood up and walked out of the courtroom into the bright Arizona sunshine. Garrett was waiting on the steps along with Sully, Vivian, Lauren, and Nina. They surrounded her with hugs and congratulations, their voices blending into a chorus of relief and joy. But Meredith's attention was caught by something else. A young woman standing at the edge of the crowd watching with wide eyes. She looked to be in her early 20s with dark hair and a nervous expression. Their eyes met. The young woman started to turn away, but Meredith called out, "Wait, please." The woman hesitated, then slowly walked over. "I'm sorry to bother you." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I just wanted to see. I needed to know if it was true. If what was true, that someone could actually win against someone like him." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "My boyfriend, he's not as powerful as the Ashfords, but he's connected. And everyone keeps telling me that no one will believe me, that I should just keep quiet and move on with my life." Meredith looked at the stranger and saw herself, 2 years ago, afraid, alone, convinced that there was no way out. "What's your name?" "Jessica." Meredith took Jessica's hand. Listen to me, Jessica. I know it feels impossible right now. I know you think no one will believe you. I know you're terrified of what might happen if you come forward. But you're stronger than you think, and you're not alone. She pressed a card into Jessica's palm. Vivian Caldwell's contact information. Call this number. Even if you're not ready to do anything yet, just call and talk to someone who understands. That's the first step. Everything else comes after. Jessica looked at the card, then back at Meredith. Thank you. Her voice cracked. I don't know if I'm brave enough. You are. You just don't know it yet. The young woman nodded, clutching the card like a lifeline, and disappeared into the crowd. Sully appeared at Meredith's side. Who was that? The next survivor. Meredith watched Jessica's retreating figure. Or at least I hope she will be. 1 year later, the summer sun blazed over Arizona, painting the desert in shades of gold and amber. Aunt Lorraine's backyard was filled with the sounds of laughter and conversation, the sizzle of meat on the grill, the clink of glasses being raised in celebration. It was the first family gathering the Holloways had hosted in over a decade. Meredith stood by the drinks table watching the scene unfold around her. Her arm had healed months ago, leaving only a faint scar where the bone had broken through the skin. She traced the line of it absently, a reminder of the night that had changed everything. Penny, for your thoughts. Sully appeared beside her, 2 beers in his hands. He offered one to her and she took it with a smile. Just thinking about how different everything is. A year ago, I couldn't imagine any of this. The trial, the healing, or the devastatingly handsome man standing next to you? She laughed, a sound that came easily now. All of it, but especially you. They had been officially together for 8 months, though the roots of their relationship stretched back further to those first weeks after the assault, when Sully had shown up every day with coffee and patience and an unwavering presence that asked nothing in return. Their relationship had developed slowly. Meredith had needed time to learn what healthy love looked like, to trust that not every man would hurt her, to believe that she deserved something better than what Dalton had offered. Sully had given her that time, never pushing, never expecting, simply being there. And somewhere along the way, friendship had become something more. I still can't believe Garrett is leaving the club. Sully nodded toward the grill where Meredith's brother was flipping burgers with an expression of contentment she had never seen on his face before. He says he's done with that life. That watching me fight made him realize there are better ways to be strong. He's right. Sully slipped his arm around her waist. Took me a while to figure that out too. You were always strong, just not in the ways you gave yourself credit for. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the party unfold. Lauren Whitmore had come down from Portland for the occasion. She was talking with Nina Calloway by the lemonade stand, both women laughing at something one of them had said. The 3 of them had stayed in touch over the past year, bonded by their shared experience, supporting each other through the ups and downs of healing. Vivian Caldwell hadn't been able to make it, but she had sent flowers and a note congratulating Meredith on the anniversary of her freedom. Even some of the Hell's Angels had shown up, men Meredith had once been afraid of, who had turned out to be some of the most loyal supporters during her darkest days. They stood in a group near the fence, drinking beer and trading stories, looking slightly out of place in this domestic setting, but clearly enjoying themselves. Aunt Lorraine bustled around the yard, making sure everyone had enough to eat and drink. She had cried when Meredith told her the full story of what had happened with Dalton. She had cried again at the verdict. Now she was crying for a different reason, as she looked around at her family gathered together for the first time in years. This was what victory looked like. Not a courtroom scene or a news headline, but a backyard full of people who loved each other, coming together to celebrate survival. Garrett wandered over a plate piled high with food in his hands. You doing okay? Better than okay. Meredith leaned into him briefly, a gesture of affection that came naturally now. Thank you for everything. I didn't do anything. You're the one who fought. You're the one who won. I couldn't have done it without you. That night when you didn't go after Dalton, when you listened to me instead of your instincts, that was the beginning of everything. Garrett was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that surprised her. I wanted to kill him. You know that. Every day for months I wanted to find him and make him pay for what he did to you. I know. But you needed me more than you needed revenge. And for the first time in my life, I chose something other than violence. He looked at his scarred hands. Maybe that's what it means to really protect someone. Not to destroy their enemies, but to help them become strong enough to face those enemies themselves. Meredith felt tears prick at her eyes. That's the most profound thing you've ever said. Don't get used to it. I'm going back to monosyllabic grunts after this. She laughed and hugged him, not caring that he still had a plate of food in his hands. I love you, Garrett. Love you too, Mary. Now let me eat. I've been slaving over that grill for 2 hours. Later that evening, as the sun began to set and the guests started to drift away, Meredith slipped into the small studio she had set up in Aunt Lorraine's garage. The space was modest, just an easel, some paint supplies, and a stool by the window. But it was hers, a place where she could create, express, process everything she had been through. An unfinished painting sat on the easel. It depicted a bird rising from flames, a phoenix rendered in shades of orange and gold and crimson. Its wings were spread wide, reaching toward a sky that seemed to go on forever. Its eyes were fierce and bright, filled with a determination that transcended the canvas. Meredith picked up her brush and began to work. The painting had been in progress for months. She had started it shortly after the trial when she was still processing everything that had happened. At first, she hadn't known what she was creating. The shapes had emerged organically without conscious direction, as if her subconscious was speaking directly through her hands. But now she understood. The phoenix was her, not the woman she had been before Dalton, innocent and naive and unaware of the darkness that existed in the world. Not the woman she had been during those 2 years of abuse, broken and afraid and lost in a fog of manipulation. This was the woman she had become, forged in fire, transformed by suffering, rising from the ashes of her old self into something new and fierce and beautiful. She worked as the light faded outside, adding final touches to the wings, deepening the shadows at the base of the flames, brightening the gold of the phoenix's eyes, until they seemed to glow with their own inner light. When she finally stepped back, the painting was complete. She stood there for a long moment looking at what she had created. It was the best thing she had ever made. Not because of technique or composition, but because it was true. It captured something essential about her journey, something that words alone could never express. The door to the studio opened, and Sully stepped inside. "Everyone's heading out. I wanted to check on you before." He stopped, his eyes finding the painting. "Wow, it's finished. It's beautiful." He came to stand beside her, his shoulder brushing hers. "Is that how you see yourself now?" "It's how I'm learning to see myself. It's a work in progress." "Aren't we all?" Sully took her hand and they stood together in the fading light, looking at the phoenix rising from the flames. "You know what I think," he said finally. "What?" "I think Dalton Ashford is sitting in a prison cell right now, probably convinced that he's the victim in all of this. And I think that for the rest of his life, he'll never understand what he lost when he lost you." Meredith considered his words. "I used to think about him a lot, wonder what he was feeling, whether he was sorry, whether he understood what he had done. But lately, I don't think about him much at all. That's healthy. It's more than that. It's freedom." She turned to face Sully. "For 2 years, he was the center of my world. Everything I did, everything I thought, everything I felt was filtered through him. Even after I left, even when I was fighting him in court, he was still taking up space in my head." She smiled. "But now he's gone, not just physically, but mentally. He doesn't live in my thoughts anymore. When I think about my future, he's not part of it. When I make decisions, his voice isn't whispering in my ear. I'm just me. For the first time in years, I'm just me." Sully kissed her forehead. "That's the best victory of all." They walked back to the main house together, hand in hand. The party had wound down with only Garrett and Aunt Lorraine left cleaning up the remnants of the celebration. Garrett looked up as they approached. "Good talk. Good everything." Meredith looked around the yard at the empty chairs and scattered plates and the lingering sense of warmth and connection. "This was perfect. Thank you for helping organize it." "Family takes care of family." Garrett's voice was gruff, but his eyes were soft. "That's what we do." Meredith looked at her brother, this man who had spent his life as the beast, who had learned violence as a language and rage as a way of being. A year ago, she would have expected him to solve her problems with his fists. A year ago, he probably would have tried. But something had changed in him too. Watching her fight had taught him something about strength that he had never understood before. He had stepped back, let her lead, supported without controlling. And in doing so, he had given her the greatest gift of all. The gift of becoming her own hero. "Hey, Garrett." "Yeah, you know what you did that night when you didn't go after Dalton? When you let me make the choice about how to handle everything?" He nodded slowly. "That was the most important thing anyone has ever done for me. More important than the protection or the support or being there through the trial. By not fighting my battles for me, you gave me the chance to fight them myself. And that changed everything." Garrett was quiet for a long moment. Then unexpectedly, his eyes grew bright with tears he would never admit to. "You were always strong, Mary. I just couldn't see it because I was too busy trying to be strong for you. We're both learning." "Yeah, I guess we are." They embraced brother and sister, two survivors of a childhood marked by violence, both finding their way towards something better. The night deepened around them, stars emerging one by one over the Arizona desert. Meredith stood on Aunt Lorraine's porch looking up at the infinite sky and felt a profound sense of peace. 1 year ago, she had been broken. Her arms shattered, her spirit crushed, her sense of self erased by a man who had promised to love her. Now she was whole, not the same person she had been before. That woman was gone, forever transformed by fire into something new. But the woman who had emerged from the ashes was stronger, wiser, more fully herself than she had ever been. She had learned that surviving abuse was not about forgetting what happened. It was about integrating it, making it part of your story without letting it define you. She had learned that healing was not linear, that there would still be bad days and dark moments and memories that ambushed her when she least expected them. But she had also learned that she was capable of more than she ever imagined. That courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. That the strength to fight didn't come from other people, but from somewhere deep inside herself, a well of determination that had been there all along waiting to be discovered. Sully joined her on the porch, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders against the cooling desert air. "What are you thinking about?" "The future." She leaned against him. "For the first time in years, I can actually imagine one." "What does it look like?" She considered the question. "It looks like this. Family, friends, work that means something, love that doesn't hurt." She smiled. "And a lot more paintings." "I like that future." "Me too." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. Somewhere in a state prison, 300 miles away, Dalton Ashford was facing the first of many nights in a cell. The golden boy had fallen, brought down not by violence or revenge, but by the courage of the women he had underestimated. But Meredith didn't think about him. She thought about tomorrow, about the art class she was teaching at the community center, helping other survivors find their voices through creativity, about the coffee date she had scheduled with Lauren and Nina, their monthly tradition of connection and support, about the life she was building one day at a time, one choice at a time. She thought about the phoenix on her canvas rising from the flames. That was her now, not a victim, not a survivor, something more, something fierce and free and utterly her own, the woman she had always been meant to become.